We start syncing as soon as we sign in. No matter who we sign in as, we're getting the same list of notes, right? Seems like different users should have different notes, doesn't it? Yeah. We don't all want to share notes. So what can we do? Recall that when we start syncing, we set an endpoint that we want to sync with. So everything in this.state.notes is going to end up at this endpoint within Firebase. These are our endpoints. Notes, blah, 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 blah. These are endpoints. Although this is a JSON type structure, and if you were getting to the data inside there, you would use dots if you had a JavaScript object. But for an endpoint, you use slashes because it's like a directory structure because you have a URL for that API endpoint. So if I wanted to sync with, say, notes slash the user ID and sync my notes there, here's what I could do. In sync notes, instead of just notes, let's change that to a template string. And let's say notes slash this.state.uid.
So why does it get changed into a template string again?
Because I wanted to interpolate a variable inside of it. This $ curly brace business, yeah, saved me from doing concatenation. So that is notes slash whatever the current user's user ID is. Let's try it out. Now I see no notes, right? What if I make one? This is my note, and no one else's. Let's look at Firebase. Haha, under notes, I see my user ID. Under my user ID, I see the ID of the specific note. Let's just get rid of these that aren't specific to a user. This is fretless Davies note. And let's sign out. And I'll sign back in as a different me. Let's sign in as Gmail Davy. Now this still shows up here, but I don't see anything in the list. What if I start typing? This is Gmail Davies note. Right? Nope, I see a new UID here. And there it is, but it's here too. It's both places. What happened? Why was it still in the form in the first place? So what shows up in the form? What item in state? Current note. So that's why it was still in there. Why on earth did it sync both places? So I called base.syncState with the first user's UID. Then I signed out. Then I signed back in, and I started syncing with the other UID. But I never actually stopped syncing with the first one. I'm syncing with both now. That's no good. If you remember long ago when we used Rebase, In addition to sync state, there's remove binding, which removes the listeners to Firebase when your component unmounts or whenever you call remove binding. It takes an argument, which is the return value of sync state. So here's their example. In component did mount, you call base.syncState, and then you save a reference to that. And then when you're done, you want to stop syncing, you call base.removeBinding and pass in the reference to the sync here. So when we do sync notes, let's do that. Let's say this dot, I'll call it binding ref, so I know what it's a reference to. Call it Firebase ref if you want to, whatever. So that's what I'll do in sync notes. And now when I stop syncing, when I sign out, I want to stop. So I have a handle auth method that does everything that needs to happen after I sign in. Let's make a handle unauth to handle everything that happens when we stop, when we sign out. So I'll cut this. I'll say this dot handle unauth, and that's going to do whatever cleanup I need when I sign out, because there's more than one thing that needs to happen. So where's handle auth? Right here. Under that, we'll make handle unauth. We'll set state UID null. But before we do that, we'll call base.removeBinding this.bindingRef. But what if we never started syncing in the first place? What if we never called sync state? Then we won't have that binding ref. So first I'll check if this.bindingRef. Then remove that binding, which means stop syncing. So let's sign out. Let's sign in as fretless guy. This is fretless. Davy's note. Keep your dirty mitts off, Gmail guy. Sign out. Sign in as Gmail. Now it's still over here because we never changed current note, right? This is a Gmail note. Keep your dirty mitts off, fretless guy. Sign out. Sign in. Okay, they are separate now, but it's still hanging around in the form. Let's stop that nonsense. So when we unauth, in addition to setting the UID to null, we should probably set current note back to a blank note. Or, call, reset, whatever. This dot reset current note. Okay. Fretless Davy's note. Sign out. Sign in as Gmail Davy. There we go. Not there anymore. Now I sign out. And while signed out, my notes are still there. When I sign back in, I get a different list. But when I'm signed out, they're still hanging around, and that doesn't seem good. Somebody else could read them if they know how to use React Dev Tools. So when we set UID to null, we should probably also set notes to an empty object. Sign in. I have a note. Sign out. And now notes is an empty object. Cool. And current node is back to blank. So we're clearing out all the things when we sign out now. Very good. So we did a few things in this commit. We started scoping the notes by UID, right? Scope notes by UID. And stop syncing upon sign out.